We got some seriously active weather that's going to be going on across the U.S. today. And just about all of it's going to be courtesy of this one storm system. But it's going to have so many different aspects of it going on. A winter storm up in the north. We've got the severe weather down in the south. This is some video. Oh, listen to this.
Holy.
That was a tornado in Columbia, Mississippi on Wednesday. Yeah, that was rated an EF0 with 85-mile-per-hour winds. That really gives you an idea of the scale of tornadoes that you can have. There are kind of levels to the game, if you want to call it that. Anybody that would experience something like that in real life, you're never going to forget it. A super memorable event, very violent. But the crazy thing is that was only in EF0, and we could see some EF2 plus later on today. It's not out of the realm of possibility. This is the area that we're highlighting. Totally typical spot to get severe weather this time of year. The Storm Prediction Center has been looking at this spot for a couple of days now, and now it's the day of. Now, some spots, if you live farther toward the west, some of these storms will fire up earlier on in the day, like midday into the early afternoon. But for a lot of this area here, Jackson, Mississippi, Birmingham, this is going to be evening into the overnight. So you got to make sure you have a way of getting info when these storms come through, because you could be asleep and maybe you get a tornado warning. This is definitely tornado country this time of year. Here's what's going on right now. There's nothing severe currently. We do have a pretty good amount of lightning between Memphis and Nashville right now, so probably hearing some rumbles of thunder. What's going to happen throughout the day is this stuff is going to blossom and become a line of severe storms that will move from west to east. And the thing we're going to have to watch out is some of this stuff that's a little bit closer to the Gulf Coast as it moves southwest to northeast out ahead of the main line. It's these individual cells that can sometimes fire up that tend to have the best chance at creating the stronger tornadoes, those violent long track tornadoes. Now, I will say some of the latest model data, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit, is showing a little bit it's trending maybe not quite as bad for some of that prefrontal individual cell stuff, but this main line is going to be kicking. We'll probably have some 80-plus mile-per-hour wind gusts in it, and likely some tornadoes that will form within the line, too. Those are usually not quite as long-lasting, not quite as strong, but I think we could see a lot of them because there's a lot of spin in the air. The CAPE, Convective Available Potential Energy, CAPE, that's basically in layman's terms, it's just how easily can the air rise. Now, this time of year, you look at the scale here, you're not going to see the reds and the pinks, because that is usually when we have a lot more moisture around, a lot more heating during the day, like in the spring, maybe early summer. So these tend to be lower top storms than what we get in the spring, but you can still have a lot of spin in the air. You check this out at 5 o'clock. The thing I'm noticing is I'm not seeing a huge amount of prefrontal stuff. That is good news. It's a good trend that we're starting to see on the forecast models, but that line is going to be moving fast, probably moving 50, 60 miles per hour, maybe even faster than that as it races toward the east, and that's going to be a lot of damaging wind in there. And you can see the time here. By tomorrow morning, it's already through Atlanta, moving through Augusta. So a place like Shreveport, I think you guys are in a unique spot because the storms will form somewhere around the Shreveport area. That's when they really just start to get going and just start to get kicking. I-20 east of Shreveport, you guys will likely have worse impacts, but just to give you guys an idea of how that's going to pan out. By the way, we'll have a couple of leftover severe storms tomorrow morning into the early afternoon across parts of the East Coast and the Southeast. So we'll keep you updated with that. We got to move on to the flood threat here because, again, I do think the flood threat's going to be a really big deal with this particular storm. The Weather Prediction Center, they've put out a level 4 out of 4 risk for flooding. That's Sandy Springs, Georgia. Just an idea of what can happen when you have road flooding, right? You got to keep in mind, you never want to drive across flooded roadways. That's like the number one thing. If you can take something out of this forecast, like what's an actionable thing to do, don't drive through a flooded road, especially when we have this kind of outlook. This is not something you see every day. We get a couple of these a year at most usually. And yeah, if you live in northwestern Tennessee, parts of western Kentucky, this is an area that we're highlighting for a ridiculous amount of rain that's going to fall throughout the day today. We've actually already got rain falling out there. I'm going to show you that in a second. But there's so much moisture available, and it's going to continue to get pumped in from the south throughout the day. Now, this is an area that they've actually seen a pretty decent amount of rain at times over the last couple of days. This is the real problem here, though. 1 to 2 inch per hour rain rates. That's an extreme rate of rain, so it's going to be falling so heavily. The creeks and streams start to get overloaded, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you've got catastrophic flooding going on, which is definitely a possibility today. I will say, on these days where we get the level 4 out of 4 risk, those are the days when it comes to flooding that we have by far the largest percentage of loss of life and loss of property from flooding. So you can see we're already starting to moisten up the ground right now. That same area is going to continue to get rained on a lot throughout the day today. And I think as we get deeper into the day, we're going to start to see some issues, because the problem is the way that this all sets up. It's a band of rain like this right now that's just moving over the same area. And then we're going to have kind of the cold frontal part of this that moves through later. But even that, as it moves through, it's going to have this northeast to southwest orientation. So the problem is every spot under there just continuously gets rained on, even as the storm itself progresses through its own natural progression as it moves to the east. And just to visualize this, I mean, you look at the forecast radar here, and again, look at this. You want to talk about training. When we use the word training, we're talking about like a certain areas like train tracks, and trains are just moving across it nonstop pretty much. And in this case, of course, we're referring to the rain. So this is going to be a really big deal, guys. I know we've got the severe aspect that's going to be mostly farther toward the south, and then this big flooding risk up here. And then we've got the wintry side of the storm, which I figure we should cover as well. And we're going to bring Nick back in on this one, because this is going to be pretty interesting, too. So we are tracking another winter storm for the northern tier of the U.S. Over 70 million Americans are going to see some snow through Sunday, with millions setting to see over half a foot of snow. Snow is going to be ongoing this morning across the upper Midwest, parts of the Great Lakes too, and it's just going to keep on moving east as we progress through the day. So parts of the Northeast are going to see some snow. I was just in the elevator. I think there were some maintenance guys in there, and I heard them talking about, man, it's going to snow later. Yeah. And you always just want to be like, I'm a meteorologist. Let me just give you let me give you the lowdown on this, but I decided to stay silent.
You're like, actually, it's
yeah, exactly.
It's hard to bite your tongue, right?
For New York, I don't think this is going to be too big of a deal. The biggest problems are going to be farther northwest.
Yeah, no doubt. And this is going to be an interesting little snow scenario, because I think what we see fall will happen tonight, and then tomorrow morning it's going to magically kind of disappear. Temperatures are going to warm, and there'll be some rain, right? So it's going to be one of those events where it's like, now you see it, now you don't.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not only the snow aspect of this. There's actually going to be some ice, too. That's the part that concerns me the most. I've had a couple commutes to work over the last week or two. One of them was a little bit of ice. The other one was like 2 or 3 inches of snow, and both of those were, I'm referring to like waking up to it and having to get it off the truck and all that. The ice is so much more of a problem, it's not even funny.
I know, and you can really, when it comes down, especially with that sleet, you can kind of hear it. It's got that really high-pitched pinging sound,
yes.
So, and you can hear it. Even if you're inside, it bounces off of your windows. So, just if you start to hear that, things are probably going to be a little bit dicey outside.
Yeah, so the Great Lakes and parts of the interior Northeast, long story short, that's where we're going to see some of the heaviest snow totals. Northern New England as well. This is going to be kind of a slow-moving storm. This gives you a really good idea, I feel like, Nick, I really like this graphic, of how this pans out along the I-95 corridor. So, yes, this part of the storm is going to move through these spots first, but it really quickly, as you were talking about, it's going to change over to some mixed precip for a little bit. I think we'll end up with some ice, at least briefly, but there is a lot of warm air, a big surge of warm air that's going to change us all over to rain for tomorrow.
Yeah, so I mean, don't get too excited if you start to see that snow. If you're still excited about the snow this far into the season, don't get too excited, because what is on the ground when you go to sleep tonight will likely not be there anymore as you wake up tomorrow morning, and it might be a totally different type of scenario.
A lot of cold air on the backside of this too, Nick. We're going to feel it after the storm moves through, and it's this time of year, you start to get some of the bigger storms. You start to feel the big contrasts every time one of these storms moves through, and this is a great example of that. Huge surge of warm air that you're going to get on Sunday in parts of the Northeast, and then you get that cold air that moves in pretty quickly behind it. So yeah, again, a place like New York City, I think tonight we start to see we'll start off with some snow. It may accumulate for a little bit of time. Maybe 1 to 2 inches if we're very lucky, and then it changes over fast enough that it becomes a slushy mess, and eventually a lot of melting into the day tomorrow. Upstate New York, pretty decent amount of ice from this. Southern New England, too. Watch out for that through especially the morning tomorrow. Oh, and I forgot to mention, another big aspect of the storm is going to be the wind. We've already got some high wind warnings, I think, that have come out. I'll double check on that with Cody here in a second, but for kind of this general area here, the coastal parts of New England and possibly Long Island as well. We're talking like what is it?
High wind watch.
Oh, high wind watches. Okay, they haven't upgraded it to warnings yet. So, yeah. That's a lot of wind.
And when it's icy out there and you've also got that wind, if you catch a crosswind and you're in a high-profile vehicle, that just may make you spin around a little bit extra. So keep that in mind and be safe out there.